and we have had no say whatsoever. I'll stop there. Thank you.
My Lords, it's a great pleasure to follow the chairman of the Democratic Unionist Party, the Noble Lord Morrow, and to listen to his words of real experience, and I just hope that some of that gets back to the Secretary of State. Now, I, like the Noble Lord MP, listened to quite a lot of the debate in the House of Commons, other place, earlier, and I have to say I was pretty horrified by the Secretary of State's short, contemptuous 2-minute, less than 2-minute speech to introduce this bill. And like others, I thought the Shadow Secretary of State actually tried very hard to deal with some of the issues. It was as if he genuinely understood the issue and the problem. I didn't necessarily agree with his final analysis of it, but at least he made that attempt. And I thought the Secretary of State has continued really to show contempt for unionists and unionism and the very important issue of why we're here, which, let's face it, is not about money. And I have to say, I think the DUP were rather short-sighted, perhaps, in getting the two linked together, the money aspect and the constitutional issue. But I do agree with all those noble lords who have said that it is disgraceful that the Secretary of State, knowing that the money is there to solve and to end the public sector workers' strike, has refused to do that, has simply said no. And of course that does mean that I think probably he thought, great, all the trade unions will now blame the DUP. And of course what we've seen, and from the headlines even yesterday in one of the Northern Ireland papers, the trade unions fairly and squarely are blaming the Secretary of State. So that has backfired very much on the Secretary of State. But you know, the contempt that was shown today really has been going on for some time. All the things that were said that the Windsor Framework and the Protocol were going to solve have proven to be nothing. No changes, no real change. Northern Ireland is in the UK Customs Union, they said. But then, of course, we're having to apply the EU Customs Code. Last week, as the Noble Lord Dodds mentioned, very nice to see the Noble Lady Laura, who moved the amendment, which was showing clearly again that once again in a bill we were saying it extended to Northern Ireland, which, as I said, most people would think, great, Northern Ireland's part of it, but no, it doesn't apply to Northern Ireland. Quite disgraceful, and again trying to hide things with words and flannel to make, because they almost as if they feel, the Secretary of State feels that Northern Ireland people aren't clever enough to be able to actually understand and see through some of these words, like saying the framework removed the Irish Sea border. What nonsense! And I think that contempt is now continuing in a way with the fact that there is no transparency whatsoever about what is going on. And I have to say, even very active members probably of the Democratic Unionist Party don't know what's in this so-called deal. And I do think, and I'm sadly, I expect Noble Lords will be very relieved to hear that the Public Bill Office refused to, or ruled out my 2 amendments, because of course, this is a very, very narrow bill, probably, again, designed very carefully to make sure that we couldn't really extend the discussion too much. But I think we always see when it comes to discuss Northern Ireland that we all find ways of making sure that we hammer home some of the issues and the points that so many, I think, Noble Lords have not really engaged with. And I was trying to move an amendment which is absolutely crucial and another real indictment of the way the government behaved right at the beginning of all this, when they changed in a statutory instrument the mechanism the end of this year for the Northern Ireland Assembly to approve or disapprove of the protocol. They changed it from cross-community consent to straightforward majority. Nothing else gets through with majority. But suddenly, somehow, the government felt that it was fine to change that cross-community consent. And I was actually trying to also move that we absolutely ensure that when there is something in writing, and I don't even know whether there's something in writing that's being discussed, but if there is, then I think within a very short period of time that should be published. If there's any draft legislation, we need that as early as possible. And we need to actually get clear answers from the government as to how long they're going to continue with these kinds of discussions. Because we keep hearing there's progress, and we just need a little bit more. I have no idea what that little bit more is, and the vast majority of people in Northern Ireland have no idea of what that little bit more is. And we should know. We should know what is happening. We should know more about what the government is offering. But of course, deep down, we all know they haven't been negotiating with the European Union. The European Union haven't been involved, and therefore it's very, very unlikely that anything is going to change sufficiently about the Windsor framework to satisfy the DUP's 7 tests. So let's not try to put the blame on the DUP. Let's not try to say they created this problem that we're dealing with today. This problem was squarely created by a British United Kingdom Conservative and Unionist government who decided that Northern Ireland was expendable when it came to leaving the European Union. Same, as I say every time, same ballot paper, same discussions. It was a United Kingdom vote, and Northern Ireland has not got Brexit. So, the question of the Act of Union, the reality to me and the principle is, forget, talking about the Act of Union, the question to me is, will at the end of all of this, Northern Ireland still be under EU law for substantial parts of its trade agreements, part of the way that everything that is coming to this House now and to the other place is having to have little additional bits about not applying to Northern Ireland. And the one that really is quite disgraceful, and we'll get more discussion on this in a few weeks' time, is the live animal exports bill. There are hardly any live animal exports going from Great Britain to the European Union. There are lots of live animal exports going Northern Ireland, Republic, European Union. And the one area that's being left out is Northern Ireland, because the EU haven't got the same law, and because we want to keep, quite rightly, the flow going back between Northern Ireland and the Republic of Ireland. The government has now used the excuse of the WTO not going to allow it. Why have they not even challenged it? Why have they not tried? But that's an issue for perhaps another day. I just also want to say one other thing about the way the government has handled this and is handling this issue at the moment. I have to say that without doubt there is a former Secretary of State who's been ringing round senior DUP people, senior unionists, senior people, making suggestions as to how they might be rewarded, perhaps, or that they definitely should begin to think about giving in. And I think that that is absolutely shocking from any ex-Secretary of State who's been probably brought in by the current Secretary of State because they feel that he has knows quite a lot about what's going on in Northern Ireland. But that kind of sort of threats in a nice way will not work with people. And I think that we have seen some of the things that have been done in the past by Secretaries of State who didn't listen, and perhaps in the whole working of the New Decade, New Approach, handled it in a way that was seen actually to be more in support of the Irish government than our own government. So I think that is something that the Minister, I hope, who knows Northern Ireland very well, will actually take up. I do condemn, obviously, any threats to Sir Geoffrey and any other threats, but I think all of us who come from Northern Ireland or have relatives in Northern Ireland who are involved politically or who are living there now, we've all had threats of different kinds. So it's important that, while we condemn that, we don't think that it's just one person who's been threatened. Threats come in different ways, and in different strengths, obviously, and are taken very seriously by the PSNI. So this bill, everyone says, is inevitable. It's not inevitable. The government could have said, we're going to go along with what we've said, that if by such and such a date the Assembly wasn't back, there would be an election. They don't want an election because they know that the mandate that the Unionists, the DUP in particular, the TUV would get to stay out until the 7 tests are met, until we're back as an absolutely integral part of the United Kingdom, would be bigger. That's why they don't want an election, and that's why, in a sense, this bill is actually something that could have been solved by simply having an election, but we may well be back, I'm afraid, in a few weeks' time, because a two-week gap is just, I think, pretty ridiculous. And I think in the end, the government will realise that from day one on this, they have handled extremely badly. They have not stood up to their commitment to be Conservatives and Unionists. And we will see very soon, probably, a new government that I hope might take a slightly different approach to the way they've been handling Unionists, pro-British people in Northern Ireland.